Hello, hello, soulful seekers. Welcome back to Trauma and Transcendence. And again, I've got a guest for you today. You're going to enjoy this one. It's going to be very fun, and I'm excited to explore that. But before we begin, as always, by the time you are hearing this, you know that I will be in the Salt Cave. And tonight is actually a bit of a different one. It is confidence and esteem. So we'll do a little bit of breath work. We will do some EFT tapping. I'll take you into a really sweet meditation. If you would like to bring your teenagers to crank out some of those esteem issues that happen during summer, this is prime time. Tonight, you can have anyone 12 plus to join us. It will be a very safe group. So you're welcome to come and join me for that. If you've been hearing this and you would like to come next time, let's see what I've got going for next week. Next week is Temple of Light and Color. So if you've ever heard of Dolores Cannon, in her books, at one point, she references this really etheric, divine, high vibrational place of healing called the Temple of Light and Color. I've done a little bit of Akashic Records. I've dove in and explored this, and we can go and have a really beautiful, high vibrational healing meditation. That's what that is all about. For today, here we are. Look at this beautiful human in front of me. We have Joshua Wagner today, who is a CHT, and among many other things, but I will let you explain those.
Well, it's nice to have you here, or nice to be here, I should say, Amanda. I'm used to being the one to say it's nice to have you here, but it's nice to be here with you. Thank you for inviting me on the show, on your podcast. And so I'm a hypnotherapist, and I've primarily been working in anxiety and trauma for the last few years, a variety of things. Pretty successfully. I have a pretty big following on TikTok, and I'm pretty big following on Facebook as well, and getting to Instagram and all these other things. So I'm primarily work online with people. I have clients all over the world, from Columbus, Ohio. And so we're not that far apart. I know that we're both in Ohio. And so I've been pretty busy for the last 4 years. But before that, I spent most of my career, 23 years, including schooling, 23 years in the Catholic Church as a priest. And I had a bit of a faith crisis in about 2006. And I stepped away from ministry for a year in 2007, 2008, and decided I wasn't quite ready yet. The faith crisis didn't really resolve, but I wasn't ready for myself to throw in the towel. So I came back for another 10 years. And I was, for most of that time, I did a little Hispanic ministry. But for most of that time, I was pastor of 2 inner city, predominantly African-American Catholic churches. And I also ran a bunch of social services in the inner city of Columbus. So I helped to run 2 soup kitchens. I was on the board of 2 soup kitchens. I helped to run a GED learning center. Started programs for entrepreneurs in the inner city, which is still going, and they actually still have me speaking at from time to time. And then helped to start a clinic, inner city clinic there. And then I was also involved in the administration of a food pantry. So we actually were very, very busy for most of those 10 years. And then, by the time about 2018 rolled around, and I'd been back for 10 years, that faith issue had never really resolved the way that I think that I wanted it to, for me to kind of stick around.
What began the markings of that?
Well, there was no beginnings of markings of that. It just, honestly, I walked, it was the Saturday night before Easter, which for Catholics is kind of the Super Bowl of the year. It's called the Easter Vigil, and that's where they bring in all the Catholics, all the new baptized adults, and they bring adults into the church, confirm them, give them First Holy Communion, that kind of thing. And it was my second year as a priest. I'd been a priest for just under 2 years at that point. And I kind of walked into the church. I was one running that liturgy that night. It was the year after John Paul II died, so lots of people were coming into the church because of Pope John Paul II. And it was fantastic and spectacular. We went to a little celebration after that, and I walked back into the church, and just like a switch flipped. And I don't know what else to say about that. Yeah. I have my theories as to what may have led up to that, but I don't really know.
That kind of explains
So
our topic today, though, because your big topic for today that you want to talk about is trusting the process. And right in that moment, you kind of had no choice just to trust the process.
right, yeah, exactly. And so I spent the next several years of my life trying to, just sort of return to where I was, but it was kind of impossible. And so, I mean, I think I did pretty good work as a priest. Certainly there's some things I could have done better, some choices I could have made better. For the most part, I renovated churches, I built the communities up, I started those social services, which are all still going. And so I was pleased with my work, but there was always kind of one foot in, one foot out. And I always kind of had my eye to sort of like Luke Skywalker, I always had my eye to the horizon, as Yoda says. He says something like that. Always look to the horizon, you do, or whatever he says. So, that was hard. It was hard to do that. And it was a very lonely existence because, I had to do that by myself. And in the middle of kind of a faith crisis, and I'm not going I won't go any deeper than that. I just kind of had to do what I did until there was a part of me, and I remember when it was June of 2018, that I said to myself, I can't do this anymore. I gotta go. And so I left a few months after that. And from that point on, I was institutionalized for 23 years, and let's just really call it what it is. I remember having a guy come to me when I was a newly ordained priest, and he had been in prison for 18 years, and it was institutionalized, and he ended up back in prison because he didn't know how to function in the outside world. And so I was kind of the same way. I had that 1 year off in 2007, but they paid me for that year off. It really wasn't, there was lots of safety nets. This time around, there were no safety nets, and I had to figure it out. And I started, right around that time that I had that faith crisis, I started having these panic attacks every day. I had a panic attack almost every day at 2 p.m. And sometimes they were more just like pauses than panic attacks. Yeah. But I would say from about 2006 on to about 2019, late 2019, I had a panic attack every day at 2 p.m. And then after I left the priesthood, I had a panic attack every morning at 4 a.m. in addition. So I was having 2 a day. I was waking up at 4 in the morning and having a freak out, like all the teeth are going to fall out of my head. The IRS was going to audit me, or something. I was going to end up on the beach, homeless or something like that. And because I didn't know really how to function outside of that. And so I landed a job pretty quickly with the Ohio Council for Home Care and Hospice as the marketing director. Because as I mentioned, I always had 1 foot in, 1 foot out. My heart was partially in it. Like, I enjoyed the work, but the lifestyle was difficult, especially in the midst of our faith crisis. So I learned how to do marketing. I learned how to do social media. I learned how to do all that stuff while I was in the priesthood. And I had these kind of side gigs. I had church tour business. I was a motivational speaker across the country in the church. So I had some skills that I developed in case I left again, because when I left in 2007, the financial crisis hit in 2008, and I didn't have any skills. So people with skills weren't getting jobs. And this guy didn't have any skills. I have a degree in philosophy and theology. I certainly wasn't going to get a job. So I kind of prepared myself in case I ever left again, which was always a kind of a possibility. And so I worked for the Ohio Council for Home Care and Hospice, and we trained hospice nurses, we trained home care nurses, we trained agencies to be compliant with the federal and the Medicaid, the Medicare standards, reporting, that kind of thing, insurance, that kind of thing. And so I was involved in doing a lot of support work for nurses and for agencies during that part of my life. And I was still having these panic attacks. I go out to my car at 2 p.m, have a panic attack. I'd wake up at 4 a.m. and have a panic attack. And so I had been in talk therapy for 9 years. Some of that was so that I could leave, because I wanted to leave the priesthood. And for a long time, it wasn't just like a split decision, like it was in, it wasn't my decision in 2006 what happened, but it was a process of getting out, and I had to trust that process, like you said. And so I'd been in talk therapy. I was still in group therapy. Because of the panic attacks, I started to take Lexapro, which were dulling the attacks. It wasn't really taking them away. And so I was at the end of my rope, and I'm sure that you have heard this before. I'm sure that a lot of people have heard this before. I I had no other resorts. Nothing was working. And this hypnotist came across my Facebook feed in an ad. And I downloaded his little course or whatever it was that he was offering as a lead magnet. And I ended up booking a session with him, paid him a lot of money, which I didn't really have. But when you're at the end of your rope, you don't really care. It was, it wasn't quite life or death, but it was could have probably gotten there.
So that was the question I was wondering was there a dark night of the soul? And it kind of sounds like there was, between the anxiety attacks. And I wonder, had you not left the priesthood when you had it really, would it have continued? Yeah.
Gosh, I don't know. I was so unhappy. I was getting, that year that I left, I was getting really unhealthy. I was doing unhealthy things, nothing illegal, but I want people to know that. But it's just, I don't know what would have happened. I do know that I was getting progressively unhealthier that year. I wasn't I was very successful as a priest, even in the middle of my faith crisis that lasted years and years. I was very successful, renovated churches, built up all those things that I mentioned before. Yeah. But that always made my numbers for the bishop's appeal. But that year I didn't make my numbers. I wasn't really working that hard. I was sleeping a lot. It was just, nothing was really functioning. And
really
by the middle of the summer, I'm like,
vulnerability, because I know that for the people who listen to this podcast, most of them are not hypnotists. So those who listen, they're going to be able to hear themselves in that, of what happens when you start feeling like it's time to go, and when you don't surrender and trust and you resist, what that could lead into.
Well, I kind of resisted for years anyway. I mean, it was just kind of getting to it. And there were things that happened that brought it to a head. There were some, as we call threshold things that got me to where I was. And I had to go, or I didn't know what else was going to happen. I was getting progressively unhealthier, and I had to recognize that in myself. And I remember I had bought a house at that point already, even when I was a priest, and I was kind of in the backyard. And I remember sitting there going, I have to be done, because I could not go on anymore. Seth Godin wrote a book called The Dip, maybe about 20 years ago. And Seth Godin says the dip is all about knowing when to quit. Winners know when to quit is the whole point of the book. It's a very short book, about 70, 80 pages. He knew when to quit writing that book, obviously. And, at 70 pages, time to stop. I think it's 79 pages. And, I think knowing your limitations, and we don't want to think that we have limitations, but we do. And you have to admit those. And it's okay to have limitations. You're not perfect. You're not required to be perfect. You're not required to have infinite strength. You're allowed to be broken sometimes. You're allowed to admit that you're broken to the right people and getting the right situations. And so I knew I had to go. I planned to go in early 2019, but some things happened and I ended up leaving late 2018. And so that hypnosis session with that hypnotist changed my life, and that's how I got into hypnotherapy and working with trauma and anxiety, working with people with panic attacks, because I knew that it worked and I'll tell you this, that it worked instantly for me. My panic attacks ended immediately with those sessions, and we didn't really even have that many sessions. And within 6 months of those sessions, my anxiety went from about a 6, 7 every day to about if I had it at all, 1, 2, oftentimes 0. So I wanted to, and of course I was looking for some meaning in my life too. It wasn't, I liked working for the Hospice Association, but it wasn't exactly filling the need. Being a priest was this thing, it's not like anything else. When you watch a movie, it's not just some guy doing the funerals or the weddings. It's a Catholic priest. They always put the Catholic priest in there. And so it's a thing culturally, whether you like it or not, it's a thing. I don't know how many movies have been made. All I can think of is My Blue Heaven is the one about ministers that aren't priests. But look at Exorcist, look at all these kind of things that are going, these popular movies. It's in the pop culture. So it was kind of like, well, what can I do to like replace that? And this is, I don't know if anything will ever fully replace that, because it is just a very unique way to be. But this comes pretty close. And so I've seen people have full remission of anxiety and panic attacks. They stop taking their meds with their doctor's advice. Their therapist fired them, so to speak, because there's nothing to come here for. I love it when I hear a client tell me that their therapist told them they don't have to come anymore.
Yes.
Because we worked for 6 weeks together. So yeah, you got to kind of know your limitations, and you have to be, and this is, I'm transitioning right now. We can talk about this into some kind of like, and into helping people with burnout, particularly, which is kind of a bigger umbrella for me. I think it includes a lot of different things. But how often have we gone past the point of burnout and we don't know what to do? And we have to make a change, or else everything's going to fall apart. That's where I was in 2018.
Yeah. What I'm hearing and what I found the most beautiful out of all of what you've shared so far is there's this underlying theme of not just surrender and acceptance and trusting, but then also look at how you were led multiple times back to helping a certain demographic of people. And it feels like to me like it was just about helping them in the right way. And now you are. But I think like you had lots of little hints along the way of, oh, I want to be of service. I like to support people. I'm in this role. Oh, I'm going to help this role of helping people who help people. And now you're doing that even more deeply, and to those people who need it the most, who are often overlooked because they are the service and caregivers of the industry, and they don't often get looked at for burnout and compassion fatigue.
I don't think there's anybody. So I'm working with nurses, or I'm kind of been doing kind of a general practice of trauma and anxiety. And I don't know if I was very clear about that, but I'm kind of focusing in on nurses, because I worked with nurses in the home care and hospice field. And my mom's a nurse, and my brother's a nurse, and I know lots about it. And when I was a priest, I was a chaplain in a hospital, Ohio State University East. I was the on-call Catholic chaplain there. Of course, I went to hospices for people as they were passing. I went and visited people's homes. So I know what they're doing. I've been there with them. I've stood next to them. I've seen the fatigue, and I've seen them. I worked limited amounts in children's hospitals if I had a pediatric case. And I was with them as some of those patients passed away too, standing right beside the nurses as they're, having those moments. So I've been in the trenches with them, and like when I was really trying to niche in, trying to find like a particular demographic to work with, I tried a bunch of different angles, but this one, boy, this is the one that really has stuck with me, because I get it. Like I lived with a nurse for the first 18 years of my life, and I saw what happens. I've seen the emotional toll, and I have a brother who's a priest now, or excuse me, a nurse now too. Like I've seen the toll on him, and the hours that he has to work, and the shifts that he has to cover, and like even the guilt that happens because there's nobody left. There's not as many nurses going in as there are leaving, and so a lot of them just get overworked to death. The money's fine for them, and it's not a money issue for them, but there's just nobody to cover their shifts, and so they just get bombarded with they get bombarded with requests to cover shifts, and I think there's a lot of guilt involved, because if they don't cover the shifts, nobody else is. So they get dragged in. I don't think they have time for themselves. As one client told me once, it's not the 12-hour shifts, it's the constant badgering for them to come in and work other shifts. And
it's also physically exhaustive too. They're on their feet,
sure,
they're moving,
well,
they're
dealing
lifting.
They're dealing with, I don't know if you've ever worked in the service industry, but I would never be a barista at Starbucks, because I don't know if I could handle some of the mean customers, frankly. And, as I've been told by other clients as well, that, I did a little focus group recently about how some of the patients can be abusive to the nurses. And not only that, but they have to because they're in pain. That's nothing against the patients, but they're in bad moods. They're not feeling good. They're grumpy. Maybe you're not dealing with a very nice person. So, I mean, it comes at them from every angle. Sometimes the doctors are short with them. Sometimes their management is short with them. I have one person, that focus group, that said something like, they were required to go to additional training outside of their shift hours after having worked a all night shift. They had to stay up, and how can you so it's coming at them from every angle. And I think that there's pressure and guilt in that particular industry to just, I know that I'll tell you this, that it's so desperate. When I was in the home care and hospice industry, some of the home care and hospice agencies were offering $30,000 sign-in bonuses for nurses.
Wow.
30 grand. I'm like, man, I'll go to medical school. I'll go to nursing school for that, just to walk in the door, 30 grand. That's how desperate they were to find staff. The staffing issues are ridiculous. And so not only is that a pressure on the agencies, but that's also pressure on the nurses themselves. Because again, if they get asked to do something outside of their normal shifts, there's nobody, they're being asked that because there's nobody else. And so I'm sure, because I was in an industry where there's nobody else, as a priest, I had 2 parishes, and some priests have, 5. And if they called me to go see somebody in the emergency room, I had to go because there was nobody else. Didn't matter what I was doing. And I know these nurses are going through the same thing, that if they don't answer that 5th text of the day, begging them to come in, then they know that nobody else is going to come in. That's why they're getting the 5th text of the day.
So
it's a lot. It's a lot for them.
Yeah. What kind of challenges are you helping them through beyond the exhaustion and dealing with the residual effects of trauma? Because there's secondary trauma that's probably happening as well.
Well, yeah, a lot of them have not recovered from COVID. Yeah. That was a rough ride for many of them. They don't really have the time to process their emotion. I don't get the impression a lot of the time, and I don't think this is universal, but a lot of the time when I'm talking to people, I'm not sure there's a lot of support services for them at all. I mean, the reaction I'm getting just from social media is ridiculous. Is there anybody helping these guys? I don't know. My mom's retired. I don't know of anybody helping my brother. He's never said anything, but he's also not the type that would probably ask for as much help. But I don't know what, I don't know what's out there for these folks, really. I'm sure there's something, but so they don't even have the time. And some of them, depending on where they're working, they're case managers that are working on a desk job, has a different experience than somebody working at a NICU,
Absolutely.
Or working in an ER or a triage center. But I mean, if you're constantly working, plus a lot of them have families, a lot of them have people to go to, or they're traveling nurses and they're not home very much if they're traveling. I just think that there's this whole work-life balance thing, which is a joke, of course. Anyway, for anybody, work-life balance is, they say that it's not really a joke, but what I mean by it's a joke is that companies will talk about work-life balance, but then they won't actually give you that's just a generalization, not just for nurses, but they won't give you the opportunity for the work-life balance. So you need that time to process. You need that time to recreate yourself, and that time to rest. We're not getting bombarded by requests to come in. Again, when I worked a very limited amount of time in pediatric hospitals here in town, just mostly because of parishioners that I had there. I was never affiliated with it, our children's hospital here, but I had plenty of patients or clients in there. What do you call them? Parishioners in there. And, but just and again, as their patients were passing away, that's particularly difficult. Yeah. My church here in Columbus was right beside the children's hospital. And so I would pass the children's hospital every single day. And I was always passed at the same time because mass was always at the same time in the morning. And I would see the same nurses for 6 months. And then I'd see medical staff in general. I don't know if they were all nurses, but I would see the same people walking across the street from the garage every single day for 6 months, and then a whole nother set of people for the next 6 months. And you're like,
that's really substantial.
What's going on here? Whole swaths of people were just probably burning up and burning out. I could see it because you'd see just, again, the same, and then nobody. Yeah. Not nobody, but a whole different set of people coming out of the garage. It's like, what? Because I was there for 10 years. in that parish. And so I drove by that place every day for 10 years, and I would just see that, turnover happen so fast, probably because that's hard work, dealing with sick kids. I think it's probably the most difficult kind of nursing that there is, because it's kids. Yeah, I mean, I think that just working in the home care and hospice industry on the association level, I'm not sure I heard a lot of things for support. And I was working in the marketing side of things. I was helping, develop programs. I was the technical guy, like helping with slides and those kind of things. Most of it was just, burn care and wound care, and it was practical stuff. I really never heard a lot. And I don't know if I haven't been in working in that company for a couple of years now, but I'm just so curious. Like, if I don't remember us offering too much support even in this kind of area. It was a very practical oriented kind of things, and I don't care how good you can help a wound close. If you're burned out, you're not going to do a very good job, and that goes across the board. When I was burned out as a priest, I didn't do a very good job. If you're burned out as a mom, you're not going to do a very good job. And we can expand this out. I'm just picking nurses because it kind of works for me. But I mean, this burnout thing happens to literally everybody.
What are some of the early indications so that someone listening who thinks they may be in burnout, how can they identify where they are in the progression of that?
What a great question. Because I have an email that I send out to my list. And when that list happens, I will give you the top 10. I should have had this ready to go, but I will give you the top 10 signs that you are about to burn out.
While you were looking for that, the other thing that I heard in your story that I absolutely loved was when you took that time to train for social media. And I'm thinking, oh, that's divine intervention, because here you are needing to use social media for every facet of the demographic you serve and how you are now. And I really do believe that we get those little hits all through life if we're paying attention, of transcendent, of, hey, this is your path, you're going to need this. At one point, I thought I was going to be a graphic web designer, and that was very cute. Went through a whole program. Yeah, no, I was certain. 9/11 had happened, and I was in college, and I was building websites, and I was inspired by that, and I thought that was how I wanted to help people. But no, ironically, what I needed was going to be for me later on. So if you are listening to this and you're having these little hits in life where things are not working, I love that you mentioned the Godin book. I haven't read it yet, but we live in a society now that is all about not giving up and, having multiple hustles and pushing and pushing. That whole hustle culture that's happening. And I'm thinking, goodness, if there were times when I didn't give up, I would have been stuck in dark night of the soul for eternity. And that's that you're so trapped in a box that there's nowhere to go. You can't move forward. You can't stay where you are. You've got yourself kind of linchpinned into a corner. So the takeaway that I'm trying to share is, if you're hearing this, there's a beautiful thing that's happening all throughout our lives where we are divinely led. And it's like little breadcrumbs. First, there was the priesthood. Then there was working with the subsection of nurses that you did, and the social media training, until finally, look how it's all kind of looped back around. So as you're listening to this, listen to Josh's story, find the themes within your own, because I promise there are some. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think it's always, I was a Boy Scout growing up, and the motto for the Boy Scouts is always be prepared. Be prepared. That's not always be prepared, it's be prepared. It's for your listeners that might be Boy Scouts. I don't want to be corrected. It's be prepared. And, I always, I learned the hard way when I left the first time in 2007 I didn't have anything to fall back on. Mm-hmm. And at the same, a big thing for the nurses that I've seen is whether or not they should even stay nurses. Because so many of them are so burned up that they can't even imagine continuing. Like, they got into it for really good reasons, but now they're done. They're burned out, and should they stay? I always think it's good to have an option, something to fall back on. Mm-hmm. So I started my social media training back in probably 2010. learned SEO, learned all those kind of things just in case. I had these kind of side hustles that I was doing, these side businesses, only because I was miserable and bored. So I learned how to do motivational speaking and traveling and learning that business. And I had like I said, a bus touring business that visited churches around the state of Ohio. Yeah. And like all of those things that I was learning kind of was a school to teach me how to. That's why I was able to walk out of the priesthood and get a job in marketing, because I already had all the skills that were necessary to do that. And I kept that job for 4 years until I became full time. Yeah. So I mean, as I had a spiritual director. When I left ministry the first time in 2007, I went on a 30-day silent retreat, which I highly recommend. It's actually 38 days of silence, and if you have 38 days to burn, go on a silent retreat for 38 days. I didn't want to leave. It was pretty fantastic. And the priest spiritual director that I had there, he sounded like Johnny Cash. He was about 93 years old, so he's gone. But he sounded like Johnny Cash. So he had that deep kind of smoky voice. And he said, it's all useful. Nothing is lost and everything is possible. It's all useful. Like every experience that we have, even the bad ones, even the burnout ones, even the bad bosses, even the crises of faith, it's all useful. Nothing's a waste if you can utilize it all. And so, I got led through that whole process, and I always kind of had, something inside of me that was making sure. I think there was always a part of me that knew I was going to leave again.
That was the
so
one
I
foot
made sure
in,
that I prepared
out.
for that. Yeah. And I have a lot of, because I'm kind of specializing right now. I don't have too many of these, but I have had a lot of clients, both as a hypnotherapist and a priest, that were in abusive situations. And I told them to have a bag packed, hopefully you never have to use it. But I mean, in some sense, that's what I was doing, is I had a bag pack. I was ready to, when the day came that I needed to go, I had a bag packed of skills and things that I had to do. So whether we're talking metaphorically or practically or actually, everybody should have a bag packed. That's why we have insurance for our cars and our houses. I mean, you should also kind of have some insurance policy for your life in terms of like what, if something happens and I can't do this anymore, what else am I going to do?
What are some of the things you recommend your clients pack in that bag?
Well, what a great question.
I'm a coach. It happens.
I think the first thing they have to do is they have to develop, if they are in a burnout situation, they have to develop the skills. They have to develop the skills before they burn out, either to prevent the burnout or to recover if it happens.
Yeah.
So that's I think everybody should learn that, because everybody burns out at some point. Everybody has too much. Everybody gets overwhelmed. Everybody gets traumatized nearly to death or has anxiety in some regard. But I just think some coping abilities. I think that everybody should learn something called nonviolent communication, which I'm a huge fan of.
Yes.
And I would say that even a big part of my practice as a hypnotherapist is nonviolent communication. Probably most of it, actually. And I was trained in that here in Central Ohio, and I don't have any like actual certifications from them, but I mean, it's what I use all the time. Because there's
I don't think they have many certifications for them. All of the NVC coaches I've met are not certified. Yeah.
Well, the certification, I think, takes 4 years. And I mean, it's intense. It's very intense. All the ones that I knew were in that program, I believe it was 4 or 5 years. I mean, it's nothing to shake a stick at.
Substantial.
But everybody should learn.
Yes.
Yeah. Even knowing kind of hypnotherapy, which I don't think NVC, nonviolent communication, is actually all that different. I would say that everybody should learn some kind of thing like nonviolent communication, empathy training, something like that. But, this is why I think hobbies are so important for people. I think the second thing that I would recommend is that they indulge in hobbies that they really enjoy and really like, because you can make money off a hobby. Yeah. Just go to Pinterest. Yeah, just go to Etsy. True. Go to, one of my hobbies was speaking in front of crowds, and I made a lot of money doing that when I was a priest, not as a priest, not on the Sunday pulpit, but in my little side business or something like that. I like traveling. I took people across the pond to Rome several times. I mean, you can make anything into a business. So I think that making sure that you are taking care of your own kind of personal needs there. Yeah. I mean, I would say that even social media was kind of a hobby for me for a long time, because the businesses were kind of hobbies for me for a long time. And then when I left ministry, I was able to sort of walk in directly to into something there was waiting for me. I was able to kind of monetize. I'd already monetized it, but like really monetize it to the tune of having a salary to do it. So, you know, don't scoff at your hobby. Have a hobby. Make sure you have something other than watching Netflix. You know, have a hobby that you like. Because even frisbee golf, like, I don't like frisbee golf. I don't play frisbee golf. I'm telling you why. I'm going to tell you why I'm bringing up frisbee golf. There's this town in Ohio called Nelsonville, Ohio, and they have this kind of like little flea market thing. It's on the way down to like Athens from Columbus, and they have this like flea market thing. And at the flea market thing, there's a frisbee golf store. I'm like, how do you make money on a frisbee golf store? You walk in, all the frisbees. That was some guy's hobby that he monetized. So, you know, if you're looking for something else and you don't want to go into real estate, because a lot of nurses look at going into real estate instead of.
Interesting.
And here in Ohio, here in Columbus, I should say, one of the nursing schools is also a real estate school. So I'm thinking they're pretty smart people. Yeah. It's called Hondros College, and you can they have a couple things, but mostly what I know them for, because I applied for a job there 5 years ago, was nursing and real estate. So smart on them, right? Because you know, I think that having a hobby is not just healthy. I think that it can be your fallback someday, because you can make money on literally everything.
So I have a bit of a theory that's forming, and I was so excited when you mentioned NVC, because that's something that I find so much use in, and I recommend to a lot of my clients. A lot of the clients that I work with are people opening their spiritual abilities. They're empathic, and incidentally, a lot of them have a large amount of codependency. And so NVC is a wonderful way to learn to speak that language of needs, of empathy, and really deep connection. And so my theory that I'm forming is, are the people who go into nursing, because I have seen this with realty as well for some reason, are they often codependent as well? Is that why many of them come into nursing, is to be a caregiver because of childhood, and then you can only live that for so long?
I think that's a fine theory. I think, you know, I don't think she'll mind me. I'm going to be general about my mom, but she kind of grew up in a chaotic environment. And she was an awesome emergency room nurse. Yeah. I think it's because she was comfortable in chaos. I won't say anything more than that, but I think that it's fair to say that there was some chaos growing up for her. You know, blended families, that kind of thing, just chaos in general. And, but they called her super nurse because she was, and she told me, and I got a little bit of this too, because I was in ERs a lot as a priest. And, like, I think for her especially, but time slowed down for her. Yeah,
and flow in that moment,
because she knew how to deal with it. Yeah. It was almost like she was just comfortable being in chaos. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think that it's very possible. You know, not everybody, but I have a theory that which is kind of related to your theory, that a lot of people will. I'll use this term because it's a church term, but I'll still use it. A lot of people go into things to minister to themselves. Mm-hmm. Like, I think this is kind of what you're getting at. Yeah. I think of like Dave Thomas from like Wendy's. Like, he was so much into helping adopted kids because he was adopted. Oh, yeah. He was so much into helping kids get their high school diplomas because he didn't graduate from high school until what? He was in his 50s or something.
I don't know much.
Like, officially graduate from high school. Like, he is a billionaire probably before he died, and didn't graduate high school until he was in his 50s or 60s. Yeah. I think that's the story. So, I mean, I think people sometimes go into.
Absolutely.
I think they sometimes go into jobs that minister to versions of themselves.
Yeah, they're trying to save that inner child on some level, or save a loved one that they couldn't save when they were a child. Yeah.
Sure. I don't think that's everybody. Because, I mean, I went into the priesthood because I felt called by God, and I went into the priesthood because my heroes were priests. You know, like, those are the people that I knew growing up.
What age were you aware of that feeling of being called by God? Like, how old were you when that arrived?
Oh, I was I was friends with a priest when I was like a teenager. I used to serve a lot of weddings for him, so I spent a lot of time with him. And he went to school up here. He was a priest in Fort Worth, Texas, and he went to seminary here in Ohio. And when we moved to Ohio, I ended up from Texas, or back, I should say, back to Ohio. I'm originally from Ohio, but we moved to Texas. I thought it was kind of a sign from God that I was in the same town as the seminary where my hero had gone. So, I was probably 16 when I really started thinking about it. And I went to seminary at 18. I went straight out of high school.
That sounds pretty transcendent to me.
I went to college, the Josephinum here in Columbus, and then I was did my graduate work in Rome, Italy.
Yeah.
So in the big house. Yeah. So it was 15, 16. I really didn't think about it before then, but it was when I moved back to Ohio from we had a little hiatus in Texas for about 4 years. That's when I really started thinking about it. But, in some sense, the church was also home. Like, it was the thing that was familiar, because I guess the nice thing about the Catholic Church, and this is just actually just practical. It's not an endorsement or anything else, but necessarily. But it's the same wherever you go, kind of like McDonald's. And so there's a comfort in that, because no matter what environment you find yourself in, because I moved from a farm in Ohio to the suburban sprawl of Dallas, Fort Worth, Texas, and the only thing that was familiar to me were my parents and the church. So, like, that's nice. That's a nice thing. But, as you well know, we tend to like things that are familiar to us. As Richard Bandler says, who your listeners probably have no idea who that is, probably most of the time. But Richard Bandler, said that familiarity is even more important than survival. Mm-hmm. So we do tend toward what's familiar to us. And so the church was familiar to me, and maybe taking care of people is familiar to nurses, doctors, but I don't think we can generalize that. I think that there are some people that certainly go into that for that reason you mentioned, but it's probably every person that goes into service work does it for a different reason.
Yeah. Did you find your red flags list or ways for people?
I did. Yeah. It's all right here. Yeah. So let's talk about a few signs that you are. What I liked about Burnout was a couple things. One, it encompassed a lot more, because you can encompass trauma, sadness, anxiety, stress, fatigue, all those kind of things, health issues. I mean, there's so many things you can cover with the word burnout. Yeah. So I'll just go over the list, and if we want to kind of pick any of these out that we want to talk about, they're good. But here's the top 10 signs. So when somebody signs up for my email list, I think this is the third or fourth email that goes out. It really should be like one of the first. Exhaustion, lack of motivation, frustration and cynicism, cognitive problems, slipping job performance, interpersonal problems at home and at work, neglecting personal care, preoccupation with work outside of work hours, decreased satisfaction, and health issues. So let me go over that list again. Exhaustion. So these are the top 10 signs you might be facing burnout. Exhaustion, lack of motivation, frustration and cynicism, cognitive problems, slipping job performance, interpersonal problems at home and at work, neglecting personal care, preoccupation with work outside of work hours, decreased satisfaction, and health issues.
If I was going to add one, I would say loss of identity, but that's on the deeper end.
Well, I think that, certainly. I think that's right. It's like, what am I doing here? Mm-hmm. Who am I? What am I supposed to be? I have a client who's not, she happens to be a nurse, but she's not, that's not why she came to me, just told me that they picked the wrong job. They picked the wrong thing, they didn't know who they were supposed to be. That was a huge part of my thing. Like, I did not, like, when I was in burnout mode as a priest, I didn't necessarily identify myself with that. It was something that I did. It was a role that I played, but it also wasn't, I think the people who are closest to me would not say at the core that was who I was at that point in my life.
It
So
still
I agree
sounds
with you on that.
perfect to me, though. It sounds perfect because I can see how you use all of those skills in what you do now and why they would be so crucial and helpful in the people you help. So I think it's just divinely perfect. I think it's beautiful.
Oh yeah, I mean the only thing one of the things I missed the most is hearing confessions. I mean, I loved hearing confessions. I was really helpful to people there. But what I do every day is almost like hearing confessions. I mean, it's very similar. I'm not
Mhm.
in a box. I'm in my room with my little
Yeah.
fake background here,
You can
and
actually make eye contact and take a deep
make
breath
eye contact.
together. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's a little more rewarding actually to not be in that box. Yeah.
I know a lot of priests that leave end up doing some kind of similar work to what they did as a priest. I think a lot of nurses probably end up doing the same thing. I don't know. The real estate thing's very common, I've noticed. There's other things that they end up
Yes.
going into, but the
It's
real estate
interesting.
thing, it's still connecting with people, still helping them
Still being
out,
of service.
still being in
Yeah.
service. Yeah.
So when does somebody know when it's time to pick up the phone and call Josh?
They probably don't. I mean,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
actually the problem. I mean, I left ministry in late 2018, and I was still, I mean, I was having my panic attacks, and I was doing a good job at work for the home care and hospice industry, but it took me a year past leaving to actually get to the point where I was willing to pay anything and do anything to get to feel better.
Mhm.
So probably by the time they realize, I'm sorry to say this, and if this is you, please, if you see the light, if you see a light coming at you, it's probably a train. It's probably not the light at the end of the tunnel. Um, but by the time they're calling me, they probably should have called me 6 months ago.
Yeah.
So I'm, or anybody, whether it's me or somebody else, doesn't really make any difference. By the time, just from my own personal experience, by the time you realize you're burned out, it's probably too late. You probably should have called, not too late to get help, but you probably should have called somebody 6 months ago.
Yeah.
But that's the thing about burnout. It's sneaky. It sneaks up on you. It's not just like it's not like this thing. It's not like my experience where I walked into the church and something snapped. It's where, like, for months and months the signs were there, but either you didn't see it, you couldn't see it because you were so busy looking at other things,
Or other people
you were
and their
numbed out
needs.
to it already.
Mm.
Our brains have a uncanny ability to numb out things just to help us survive, and then all of a sudden this is a metaphor that I like to use. When I was in 8th or ninth grade, we had to build bridges out of toothpicks. So you had to build like a little tiny bridge out of a toothpick, and then we, so they were 3-dimensional. Then they hung a coffee can from it, and you put weights in there until the bridge collapsed. And so everybody kind of was in a little bit of a competition.
Yeah.
And we built the strongest bridge. I remember we won that year. And so we're there in math class, and we had this big, back when coffee cans were made of metal, and we were dropping weights in, and our bridge just held the whole time. And the other bridges, they would fall apart slowly or something like that. Ours just held firm. And finally they put that last weight in, and the whole thing just collapsed. I think that's what happens in burnout situations. I think weight keeps getting added to situations, and there's not a lot of time or ability to actually process appropriately. And then what seems like an overnight collapse has really been building for a long time.
Mm.
So by the time that collapse comes, so you got to be really aware. You got to be really mindful of yourself. You got to say to yourself, well, are there any signs of this going on? Is something worse? Am I not doing one of these 10 signs? Am I thinking about work outside of work? Is my relationship at home falling apart because I can't de-stress from the job? And again, this is not just about nursing. It's about anybody can end up here. Am I feeling fatigued? Am I feeling tired all the time? Am I not taking care of myself? Am I exhausted all the time? Like, these little signs and symptoms before the big burnout comes, it happens for months and months ahead of time. Again, when I, had my stuff happen in started in really late 17, when the second big burnout happened, I can look back and I can say, yeah, that probably started a year before I left.
Yeah.
Probably started at least 6 months before I decided that I was going to go, and a year before I left, finally. And
Was resentment ever a piece of that puzzle for you?
Resentment?
Yeah.
Not toward the church. I don't have any I mean, I don't think that I'm the poster boy for theology these days, for Catholic theology. But no, the church was my home for a long time. I mean, I think that,
or even just the patrons who came who needed support.
No, I loved the job that I did. I enjoyed it quite a bit. I didn't like the lifestyle. And I
For
think
me, resentment was the puzzle piece of, ooh, if I'm feeling this way, I'm heading down a bad path. It's not going to end well. Yeah.
No, I never, I can't say I ever resented the people. Yeah. I loved the people. I thought I loved who I got to work with. That was never a problem. Sometimes other priests, there was a couple of priests in my life that were, particularly at the beginning of my career, that one in particular was not great to me. That took me, if I had any resentments toward anybody, it was him, but it took me some time to get over that. Yeah. And I'll just be general about that. It was kind of like, kind of a situation where I was kind of newly out and kind of looking for some support, and it ended up kind of going the other way. If that makes any sense. So that took me, and I think that contributed to my issues in 2006 as well as that relationship. I won't get any further than that, but I think that if I had any resentment, it was probably toward that person, which I worked through. Yeah. It was hypnotherapy that actually got me, after 15 years of being able to let go of that finally.
I'm not surprised. And that's the story with so many hypnotists of, why are you a hypnotist? Because it saved my life. That's almost
It was the last resort. And I hear that from so many people that I work with. It's like they've tried everything and this is what works finally. Mm-hmm. And I don't always understand why it works, honestly. You just do the process and people get better. Get out of the way and people get better. I have clients where they get better and I'm like, I have no idea what happened. Like I don't know what thing that I said or did, or what door, if I did anything at all, if they were just ready to heal. I mean, who knows? I mean, sometimes I know what happens, and other times I'm like, whatever. I have to let go and just let it happen all by itself. I tell people that all the time. Let it happen all by itself. Get out of the way. Let it happen all by itself.
Is that where the trusting the process comes in? Is because you've seen that so many times?
Well, I know that your listeners are a bit more than hypnotists or people that maybe even participate in hypnosis. But I think we can generalize this and say that there's a part of us that tries and forces and wants and needs to know why. And some people call that the conscious mind, or whatever you want to call it, the ego. Some people call it that. I mean, there's lots of names for it. But once you get that part out of the way, or teach it to cooperate, I don't know what the right word here is. Once you transition from trying to doing, from force to flow, from having to know why to accepting that you might not understand, that's when people get better. And I don't, there's so many metaphors for it, the wave realizing it's not the ocean, the sunbeam realizing it's not the sun. Still part of those things.
Yeah.
So I think trusting, whether it's a spirituality or hypnotherapy in your unconscious mind or whatever you've decided to do, that it's sort of relaxed agency, I think is a good word for it. It's a relaxed sort of like acceptance, allows you to make those decisions from a peaceful position. You can't force yourself to be peaceful. You have to create the environment for peace and let go of that need to force things to happen.
Yeah. I like to look at it in terms of co-creation of, okay, I've done all of my possible best. I can't see a single thing to bring forward. I feel like I've done my part. It's going to sit back and allow.
Yeah, it's exactly. I mean, it's even in the business side of things. Like, I know this is not a business podcast, but this is a really great example, like when I'm really, we kind of talked about this a little bit before we got on here. When I'm grinding and I'm trying and I'm like doing all this stuff and I'm like, I got to make this kind of money or I got to do this kind of thing, it never comes.
Yeah.
And then when I let go of things and I trust my gut, and whatever you want to call that, whatever that is, that you go from force to flow, it all works out exactly right. You can't tell me how many times I'm like, I'm just going to take a break and I'm just going to chill out. And then all of a sudden, like I see 3 people booking me for sessions while I'm taking the break without having done anything.
Yeah.
And I can try and try and try and try and nothing happens.
Yeah. You were talking about metaphor before, and someone used to say, God doesn't let the birds starve. So why would you?
Yeah, that's directly out of the Bible. Like, how much more are you worth than the sparrows in the sky? As Jesus says that. I also think that, like a Taoist sort of idea of desireless, excellent, and gone. Desireless being like doing things because it's the right thing and not expecting an outcome. Mm-hmm. That's desireless. And if you're desireless, you can be excellent. Because excellence, the more desire you have, the less excellent you're going to be. And then being gone is doing the thing without needing an outcome, being excellent at doing it, and then being able to walk away from it and say, all right, c'est la vie, que sera, sera, or whatever French phrase you'd like me to put out there, and being able to just kind of accept what happens, And the Stoics are the same way, the Stoics have a very similar thing. It's, see clearly, without that attachment, see it as clearly as you can, act correctly without, do things because of the right thing to do, and then accept what comes. Mm-hmm. Those are your tenets of success, I think. And I think that when you are desireless, excellent, and gone, or you see clearly, act correctly, and accept what comes, I think that when you're operating from excellence and you're operating from truth, I think things will turn out. When you're operating from scarcity and fear and shame or guilt or any of those things, that's what leads to people not doing very well.
For the people listening today, what is your biggest hope that they take away from hearing this conversation?
Well, I hope that they can pay attention to themselves and be honest with themselves. You don't have to be perfect. It's okay to be a little broken and even a little wounded. It doesn't make you a weak person. It doesn't make you a bad person. It's okay to ask for help. It's okay to take care of yourself. Understand that when you take care of yourself, you will be better at taking care of others. And that's not just directed at people in the medical field, but at everybody. Be careful of the signs. If you are experiencing any of those 10 or 11 things that we talked about, head it off at the pass. You don't have to wait. It's like alcoholics don't have to wait for their rock bottom to stop drinking. They can see it coming and stop drinking. So if you see yourself careening toward the edge, stop before you get there. Because a lot of people, once they get over the edge, it's a point of no return for a lot of people. They just don't know what to do. Be mindful of yourself. Listen to what's going on deeply down inside of you. Take that time to do that. And make sure you have your bags packed just in case something comes up. I think those are some good things. So I can really be succinct about this. Pay attention and be ready. How's that?
I like it. If they want a copy of your list, where do they begin to sign up?
Well, that list comes out of an automatic email for when they sign up. But I believe you're going to have some things in the show notes for this, so they can. I have 2 websites really. I have inspiringhypnosis.com, which is kind of my generalized practice, and then I have Reclaim Charisma, which sounds really generic, and it's on purpose generic. And so that's really my nurse burnout stuff right now.
Yeah.
But anybody that's burned out can contact me. You don't have to be a nurse. It's just that's where I'm sort of putting a little bit of my attention. But if you are not that and you're still feeling some emotional burnout, I can tell you something that, and you've probably seen this too. And I would say that the people that I work with start to find relief within about 3 to 4 weeks.
Mhm.
You know, I work with people for several weeks in a row, but a lot of people start feeling better within 3 to 4 weeks. I had a session last night with somebody in the West. She came on the screen and I was like, "Oh my gosh, you're so much better!" Like you can just tell. And I didn't charge her for the session because there was nothing to do. I love those kind of sessions. I said, "Well, let's just put this." She already paid for the session, so I said, "Let's just do a check-in in 3 weeks for free. You know, let's do a session in 3 weeks. Make sure you're okay." But she's probably going to be okay because it's almost like sometimes I'm working with people, I can see them change right in front of my eyes. Like, something clicks. I don't know what it is. Sometimes I don't know. I don't need to know what it is all the time anymore. But you just see people all of a sudden like just spontaneously, what seems like spontaneously get better. But they're not spontaneously getting better. They're just like nobody spontaneously burns out.
Yeah.
People don't spontaneously get better. They put the focus and the work in and they get better. But those are my two websites, reclaimcharisma.com and inspiringhypnosis.com. I'm sure you're going to have something in the show notes. If they want this list, they can reach out to me directly. Anybody can have a free session with me. I'll do a free first session for everybody. I've always done that with my business because I don't charge people until I know that I can help them. And if I don't think somebody's a fit, I won't work with them. I've told people no before that I don't think I'm the right fit.
Yeah.
Or I don't know if I can handle this, or maybe that we're just not personality fits or something.
Mm-hmm. I love that. This was a beautiful episode. I've enjoyed and learned so much from you today. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on here.
Yeah. It's been a pleasure. I feel like I could talk to you forever. Like there are so many other things we could explore and deepen into. We'll have to save that for Hypno Thoughts. And I'm trying to recall if you said you were going this year or you were taking a break this year. Were you there last year?
I was the last 2 years. Yeah. I can't stand Vegas.
Understanding you better now, I completely understand why that is.
I can't take it. When I was a priest, I had a wedding there in I think 11 or 12. And I had to go early because I had problems with because you have to do so much to be a wedding minister in the state of Nevada and Clark County in particular. And the diocese was also giving me some trouble. It wasn't the diocese; it was there's the parish that I was working for. That nothing but trouble with that parish. But so I had to go a week early. So I stayed in the New York hotel for a week by myself. And I was a priest, so celibate. I didn't drink. I didn't gamble. Now, a lot of priests do drink and gamble, but I wasn't one of them. So I sat there and every 5 minutes, the roller coaster, because there's a roller coaster at New York, would go by my window. And it like ruined me toward that town. So just feel like it's an energy drain there. So maybe I might go again next year. We'll see what happens.
Last time you attended, were you speaking?
I was not. I'll get into speaking at some point.
Any speaking engagements coming up?
No, I haven't really gotten back into speaking since I've done I've done some stuff on Zoom, but nothing in person. Okay. I miss it. I miss doing. I mean, it's an adrenaline rush. I don't know where. I'm not really putting my shingle out there for speaking right now. I mean, I will. So if somebody wants to have me come out and speak at their group, happy to do that or do a Zoom thing. But I mean, I was used to speaking in front of crowds of 3,000 people. I do miss that a little bit because it is a rush.
Oof. Yeah.
But not doing anything, not doing any speaking right now.
Okay.
I might, as I get more and more into the specific practice with the nurse burnout and that kind of thing. I suspect I might catch some more speaking gigs.
Okay. Any final thoughts on trusting the process?
No, just get out of your own way. I think that's a big part of this. Pay attention, have your bags packed, get out of your own way.
I love that. I don't know if it's just a trend lately, but I've seen a lot of clients who are self-gaslighting now. It's like, okay, you can stop that. And sometimes we don't know when to quit. I've definitely had phases within my life that I can identify that of not knowing when is enough, of you don't have to keep trying to do the same things over and over again that aren't working. So, all right, soulful seekers, I hope you've learned wonderful things today. I am going to put some links in the show notes for you. And if you want to learn more about Joshua Wagner, you can also visit my site. There will be a blog post about him, or Inspiring Hypnosis and what was
Reclaim
the other
Charisma.
one? Reclaim Charisma. And if that's been you, reach out to Joshua. He's clearly got the skills to help you out of it. He's got the experience and he's got the life lessons and having been there. And there's no better coach than a coach who's walked the path themselves multiple times. All right. Bright blessings, everyone. Stay inspired and enjoy your life best you can. Bye for now.